So we'll start off right away with Professor Mark Groen, and I will just be in the background here. Mark, please take it away.
Hi, I'm Mark Groen. I'm in the College of Education. I work primarily in the secondary program. So those history majors wishing to access our program, we're very happy to have all of you, especially since Jeremy and Michelle have done such a great job of preparing you all.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Michelle Lorimer. I teach the teaching history classes 3010, 5700, and do California history typically. So happy to share any insight on those classes or anything else with you all. Yeah, nice to be here.
So I'm Oscar Fernandez. I graduated from CSUSB with my history degree in 2015. I've been a teacher for the last 5 years, and currently I'm teaching 7th grade history. Before that, I taught 11th grade American history. And I was lucky enough to be one of Dr. Murray's students, but also one of Dr. Groen's students as well too, because I got my credential right there at CSUSB as well too, which was a great experience, just like getting my bachelor's degree. And then now I work inside of San Bernardino City Unified School District. So I've kind of been all local to San Bernardino this whole time. And it's been a great experience so far, and I'm excited to be sharing with you guys today. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm James Wiggins. I graduated in 2015 with my bachelor's in history. I got my teaching credential as well through Mr. Groen, Dr. Groen. I currently am actually at Canyon Springs High in Moreno Valley. I also am teaching 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So I'm teaching world history, U.S. history, government, and economics. Actually, I'm hoping to get my AP certifications to start teaching Euro as well. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Is it me? I don't know. What was the sonority list? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Byron Williams. I graduated back in 2019 from CSUSB with my BA, and I moved on, got my master's degree at Cal Poly Pomona in May of this year. And I've been currently working as a private school teacher this is ongoing for 3 years now. And I will be starting up as an adjunct professor at San Bernardino Valley College in the spring. So
that's the quick version of introductions, and that's very exciting news from Byron. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And I know we have some of our MA students in here, so we can talk about what's involved in teaching at the community college level as well. These sessions are usually focused on the 7 to 12 level, but I like that Byron's in to tell us a little bit more about that. Obviously, Michelle and Mark and I can also talk a little bit about the doctoral process and what goes into that if anybody's interested. But yeah, Byron, I remember was one of the students who was asking me, when's that MA program going to be deployed? And just couldn't wait any longer. And of course, headed over to Cal Poly Pomona, another excellent MA program. We do have the MA program in place now. Thomas and Alexander and Matt, who are in the chat today, and Christina can attest to that. So if the group, we do have a sort of a critical mass of people who might be interested in that. And of course, I'm going to do a song and dance for James and Oscar and see if I can get those guys to come back and join us in the MA program. And everybody, I can share some materials about our MA program again as well. So that's a new element to these sessions. We've had several sessions. We have 2 recorded ones that are already posted up on YouTube, but this is a new element that I think we could add to this from Byron's perspective. So I'm excited about sharing that as well. I think everybody who's gathered should feel free, and I noted this in the chat, to raise your hand virtually, to enter any questions in the chat at any point. But I also know that sometimes, and James and Michelle and Oscar and Mark and Byron will attest to this, that sometimes you just don't know what the questions are. You don't quite have the perspective to know what you should be what you should be asking at this point. You're going through your undergrad career, very, very dutiful students, dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's. And then you hit the point where you're ready to go get your credentials. And I'd like to first start asking Mark a quick version of this. And we've done this a couple times, Mark, and it's always helpful. And things have been a little bit in flux with a quarter to semester transition, but also with the online shift. If you could give us a quick rundown of what a graduating senior, somebody heading for either December or June graduation, should do in a perfect world scenario to make them a perfect candidate to head to ease right into the single subject credentials program. What does that look like? And I will also pull up some websites for you and share them in the chat. And if I get the wrong ones, let me know.
Okay. One of the first thing you need to do is apply to the credential program. So applying to the credential program is the first step. It's actually the only real step. And the application process to get into the credential is, I'm often told by students, and several of you may comment on this, is the hardest part of the program. Getting into it is harder than getting through it. So we're preparing you well for the bureaucracies you will enter in a district. But once you're accepted into the program, it's usually 1 year. The A track is a 1-year program. We do have a slower B track, which is a 3-semester program. Most people like the A track. You're in and out. We basically want to get our social studies people through as quickly as possible. We have quite a number of social studies people in there right now, but those of you coming in are coming into an excellent job market. Districts are trying to hire our teacher candidates out from under us right now, including social studies. You may have been told it's difficult to get a job in social studies, and usually that's true. But right now, there are jobs out there. And it looks like that's going to continue for a little while, because a lot of districts are preparing to offer handshakes to the older teachers who aren't adapting well to the partially online environment. So if you're a student thinking of going into teaching, this is the time. We need you. Did that address the concerns, Jeremy?
That's great. That's a really great start, Mark. And I did throw a single subject credentials link into the chat for everybody who is headed in that direction. Do bookmark that page so that it doesn't creep up on you. Bookmark the page, get familiar with the requirements so that you know what is going to be expected of you, and you don't end up being one of those guys who's emailing your professor and saying, I need this submitted in the next 11 hours, or something like that. If in terms of supporting documentation and all the rest, right? So timely submission of that application, which it looks to me like it is early considerations February 10th, priority consideration is March 10th, and late consideration deadline is April 21st. So go ahead and Mark, can you give us a quick sketch of what is expected in that application?
Yes, you're going to need transcripts. You will need CBEST. Well, CBEST and CSET are both currently waived, and because the testing centers are largely closed, the state has given us waivers at this point for CBEST and CSET. That's causing problems, however, with our districts. The districts are saying, wait a minute, these people aren't qualified to teach. So the CBEST was a good screener, or CSET was a good screener. But if you've gone through the A track at Cal State San Bernardino, you're in good shape. We haven't had too many problems with social studies people. It's usually in the math department where they're having problems. So social studies has been very good to us so far. And does your A track have the CSET waiver?
We do, and for our students, that the track A is the pre-credential track. So we took those letters off them. So James and Byron and Oscar will know what you're talking about, Mark, but we changed that name. So that's the pre-credential track, We do have the CSET waiver in place. And just a second after I ask Michelle a little bit about these exams, I ask her to elaborate a little bit about preparedness and getting our students from graduation into those credential programs and what's involved, a little bit about those exams. And Mark, you can continue to weigh in on this too. What's required is 2 additional courses that are not in the pre-credential track graduation requirements. That is History 3010 and History 5700. And taking those classes according to our agreement with the CTC then grants a pre-credential, what was once known as Track A student, the waiver, the CSET waiver. I'm glad to hear that a new wave of waivers is not causing trouble for history grads, because indeed I think our curriculum is very well aligned with what is expected. I don't know if it was Byron or somebody. No, it wasn't Byron. A former student said, I took this CSET and it was like the same question almost that I had in one of your classes, and I could have done it in my sleep. So that was you, James. Was it the Chiang Kai-shek Mao Zedong one? So we do sort of neatly align, and that's why we were approved by the CTC to grant the CSET waiver. Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Is there anything you'd like to add to? Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Michelle into a dodgy situation, Jeremy, because I would encourage students, if they can get the waiver courses, to do so, because the CTC has also said, oh, well, the credential programs can verify subject matter competency. There's a problem there. We're credentialing in 4 social science fields. There is no such subject as social science. And because we're asking for credentialing in 4 different fields, there's no real criteria for how do we do that. And our credential analysts are throwing up their hands and going, this is crazy. We can't do this because there's no requirements. And Michelle might be able to comment on the new developments, but if you can get the CSET waiver, you help everybody, including yourselves.
Yeah, that was going to be my really major point, is that to avoid any of those complications, just do the CSET waiver, the pre-credential track, and then you're good to go. You don't have to meet you're not going to meet any other barriers, because if you do the pre-credential track to get the CSET waiver, so doing History 3010 and History 5700 I think, Jeremy, this is the piece that I needed a little bit of clarification on. The GPA requirement for that, was it a B- or a C+?
I believe in all required courses, it needs to be a C or better.
Okay.
And I could be wrong about that, but let me, while you continue, let me check on that.
Okay, so so long as you pass all of the classes in the pre-credential class with at least a C, say a minimum of a C, but maybe higher, you will we have checklists through the department that make sure that your classwork, through the work that Dr. Murray has done in getting the CSET waiver program put together, that it meets all of the different domains from the CSET exams. So you don't have to take the exams, you qualify, that you show your content knowledge. And so you can take that CSET waiver, especially to our credential program, but then it's also good, throughout the state to show that you have subject matter competency. So I think that's, one of the really super beneficial things that our program has to offer. And I'm glad to hear that it's giving you well-trained students, well prepared, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle and Mark. And I'm sure James and Oscar and Byron are saying, what the hell are you guys talking about, CSET waivers? This is new. this is new business, so our undergrads should be aware of this and should take advantage of this. Standardized tests are, well, don't get me started on them, in terms of equity and accessibility and all the other things that are bad about them. We all know about it. So beside any philosophical issues with standardized tests, our department is preparing you indeed for this. And this past May 2021, we were approved to grant the CSET waiver, what is called subject matter competency equivalent or something like that, SMCE. They don't like the word waiver, but basically that's essentially what it is for the CSET, not for the CBEST, by the way. And Mark had noted there are some waivers in place for the CBEST, and we can find out more about that. James, speaking of, for later, we can also mention that there are, for those of you who are looking at PhD programs, and this is something Alexander has also found, there are lots of waivers for GREs as well. And this is way off topic, but a lot of these standardized tests are going the way of the dodo bird, which is a good thing, I think. Pearson or whatever large mega corporation is not going to be very happy about it, the ones who administer them. But otherwise, everybody else on the planet is very happy about the fact that these inequitable standardized tests are becoming defunct. Alexander said, is the waived CSET not applicable for History Track B students? That is correct, Alexander. The CSET waiver is not available to track the general research track or the public and oral history track, as far as I know. And Mark has mentioned maybe a broader CSET waiver that doesn't have to do with our specific qualified program, and that may be in place in terms of COVID exceptional circumstances waiving some of these exams. But as a rule, what were formerly known as Track B students or general history research track students and our public and oral history track students do not qualify for the CSET waiver. Our pre-credential history students are specifically taking courses that are aligned with the CTC requirements and therefore give them the CSET waiver. And I don't know anything about a CBEST waiver. Should I, Danny, this is maybe for Mark and Michelle. Danny Rubio says, should I be applying for the CBEST now? And Danny, you are graduating in December or June? June, Danny's graduating in June. Should he be applying for the CBEST now, Mark?
That's a dodgy question. It's always better to have it than not have it, because eventually the state's going to come back and say, okay, no more waivers, COVID's over. And if you've got it, and they can't come back after you.
All right, thanks, Mark. And Matt asks, those of us who are grad students, do we only need to take 3010 and 5700 to meet the criteria for the CSET waiver? Your undergrad transcript must also align, Matt, with a CSET waiver approved program like Cal State San Bernardino's pre-credential teaching track. So that's Matt's question is a little similar to what Christina and Alexander were asking. Can students who are not specifically on this pre-credential track, how do they get this? Do they just take 3010 and 5700? If somebody within our department, and you can do this ad hoc, Matt, anybody can do this, have an informal transcript. You could send it to a faculty member, a chair of the department. You could send it to somebody in College of Ed if you want to, but you could also send it to me or Professor Keating or Professor Jones when she returns in January. And we can take a look at your transcript and quickly let you know whether it sort of Tetrises into all of the slots that are required for a CSET waiver. And if it doesn't, then there would be more than 3010 and 5700. If it does, then there would just be those two courses. But it would also have to do with whether your undergrad transcript is from an institution that had that CSET waiver granting ability. these are really, as Mark says, and these are really in the weeds. I am not the best guide through this thicket of bureaucracy. I have a well-known allergy to bureaucracy. James said, I got a master's in education just to avoid the GRE, but all I had to do was wait a little longer, apparently. Could have just got my MA in history like I wanted. This is a lot of programs are waiving the GRE, especially in the UC. Yeah, it's a bummer, but and we definitely do not have a GRE requirement in our MA in history program. Byron, did you have to take the GRE for Cal Poly Pomona?
No, and most
Okay.
Cal States don't. Even I applied to Cal State Long Beach too. They don't require it either.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a good progressive sort of investment in the idea of equity. It's garbage. It's basically SAT plus the GRE, waste of everybody's time, I think. But that's just my radical opinion. So don't let me sway you. Danny said, oh, June, and thank you. Alexander said, my friend was able to take the CBEST from the comfort of his home currently, which beats going to the testing center like I had to. That's interesting, Alexander, because accessibility is a major issue that I have with these exams. That is having the physical capacity, whether it's disability or anything else, to sit for that extended period of time in the environment that you're expected to sit in. So that the inaccessibility of a lot of these testing centers and situations is an issue. And it sounds like that, that there is some accommodation taking place, reasonable accommodation. Jason says, so 3010 and 5700 are not required for graduation, but it is better to take them. Correct, Jason. These two courses are not required for graduation, but if you are interested in securing a CSET waiver, you should take them. Michelle, did you want to jump on Jason's question there? 3010 and 5700 being whether they're required. They are not required for graduation, but if you add them to the pre-credential track, then you've got your CSET waiver in the bag, right?
Yeah, that's how I understand it. So I think the really key part is if you're thinking about teaching at the secondary level and pursuing a single subject credential in social science, these classes are really great because they provide you with the opportunity to get a sense of what you may be expected to do, to get a glimpse into what it might be like to teach, to get some hands-on experience building a model lesson plan, to think about some of the different methodologies and issues in teaching history, social science. So you can work through some of the problems before you fully commit to a credential program to see if your expectations are what you're thinking. So 3010 is like a basic kind of methods class and getting your feet wet. What is teaching history, social science? What are standards? What's the framework? How do you build lessons? How do we get people to think historically? So just kind of like taking yourself one step away from being a student and trying to shift your view in the eyes of how it might be to be a teacher. And then in 5700, we do like real hands-on field work. So currently, like Matt is in our 5700 class right now. And what we're doing is building curriculum for the California Citrus State Historic Park and this history and relevancy project that's partnered with UC Riverside. So, because of COVID, we're not working with students, we're not in classrooms, but we're building curriculum. They're getting some hands-on experience. We're working with community partners. So they're getting a sense of some of the work and what it may be like to really do some sort of thing as a teacher, even though right now we're not, on campuses and classrooms.
And Byron's endorsement there from the sound of them. These are new, again, new and along with the Q2S transition. These are a couple big developments here that include that sort of pedagogy and practicum. Speaking of practicum, very practical question from Diana. If I graduate in June, I have to wait until after I have my BA in hand to apply, or can I apply the semester I'm graduating? that's to Mark. I think you can certainly apply before you graduate, Mark. Is that right? You apply on that February schedule that we noted earlier, I think, Diana. Is that right, Mark?
You're accepted on condition of graduation.
Okay, and I assume, Diana, you were talking about the credential program there. And Alexander says, single subject credential with a focus in US history. It's only able to teach US history, question mark?
No.
No, Mark, you want to take, they cannot branch out for world history, vice versa?
Oh, they absolutely can, yes.
All right.
Yeah, and in fact, if you have a single subject credential in social studies, you can be teaching geography, economics, civics and government, psychology, sociology, and just about anything else they can't put in another slot. And
That's
there's
a
an
good
ethnic studies requirement coming down the pike for 2025, which I imagine will end up in social studies.
If it's okay, I'd like to open to our excellent alumni. Thank you guys for joining us, because that's a nice transition. Throwing you into the deep end, it sounds like here. Just get in there and teach everything, say yes to everything. James, Oscar, Byron, who wants to jump on this question of well, we can talk a little more about the credential program and the mechanics, but let's jump ahead and talk a little bit about Alexander's question. What's going to be expected of you? Everything.
Oh yeah, you definitely teach everything. They're still trying to push psychology on me, and I'm pushing back as far as I can. I literally have no prep period, so they're trying to say, yeah, next semester you should take this. I'm like, no. So yeah, you're gonna teach. Like I said, I'm teaching world history, US history, government and economics, and they've pushed sociology on me one year. They're trying to push psychology on me, and I'm pushing back on that one. Like, I don't want to teach that one. So
thanks,
Yeah.
James. Oscar, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to echo what James said, is just be flexible. That's one thing that you have to be, and not necessarily because they're going to push stuff on you. And yeah, there's times you can say no, but sometimes things totally out of anyone's control happens. And so for me, I started teaching US history to 11th graders, all 6 periods, all US history, which was like my dream. And I got to do that for 1 year. And then at San Gorgonio High School, where I was at, the enrollment numbers shrank. And so suddenly now there's not enough students to justify my position. And so I got transferred to a totally different school, which is how I ended up in middle school teaching 7th grade world history. So totally different from what I started with. And so you have to be flexible and know, hey, these are all the different classes I can teach. And I kind of got to have it in the back of my head that my number might get called and I might have to do that. So be prepared to do that. So like if your interest is US history and that was your concentration, that's great, but be ready, kind of read up on other things as well too, to kind of keep yourself fresh on some other topics in history, or also the geography, the economics, the more political science stuff that goes with the government class. And so those kinds of things, because you never know what might happen and you might end up doing something like that.
Yeah, I definitely put big bold letters right now. I was like, be flexible, definitely. And I can say that more so because I teach at a private school. So they throw you anywhere, not just history classes. So I teach math classes, algebra 2, geometry, English classes. They send you everywhere. So it's definitely being open and trying to be indispensable really for the job. So.
And that's one thing too to say about public school education and stuff. You can only teach, you're only allowed to teach what's within your credential and what you're allowed to teach. And yeah, keep that in mind. Like Byron, if you end up going through private school, you can teach any number of things. And, please don't put me teaching math to kids. That's like my worst subject of all time. Literally the last math class I had to take in college, like I went out to dinner to celebrate with everyone that I knew because I was like, no more math for me. So yeah, keep that in mind as eventually you go and apply to jobs to get that gainful employment. If you want to stick to kind of the social studies subjects, definitely try and find something in public school because that guarantees you're going to do that. Now, it doesn't mean they can't give you like one section of Avid or something, but the rest of your schedule will have to be kind of within that social studies stuff. So.
Yeah, not to mention like they were saying, to make yourself, as valuable as possible. I also am in charge of National History Day. I also do the speech club. So yeah, you're going to be tasked with a lot of other things too. Some of them are extra pay, others are not. But yeah, just take as many of them as you can and make yourself to where they can't get rid of you. They can't afford to. Because apparently now there's opening positions. That was not the case when I got out. So it's a free for all.
I like this flexibility recommendation, make yourself indispensable recommendation. My brother's now teaching 11th grade back in New York, and they've just asked him he's coaching the JV soccer team at this huge school that has 3 JV soccer teams. It's like thousands of kids. And they've just asked him to coach the indoor track team. So be ready for things to be thrown at you, whether it's National History Day, speech club, chess club, and being ready to be flexible is really important. I wanted to talk a little bit about prep, James, because I think there's a misunderstanding of prep. There was, for me anyway, when I started here at Cal State in 2011, there was this idea that I needed to have like 30 TED Talks ready to go before I even stepped into the classroom. But and this is maybe something that James and Byron and Oscar can all talk about. Your prep and preparing courses, teaching a course the second time as opposed to the first time. Anything on that subject that you guys would like to share?
Well, I had a prep period, but then like I said, I tried to make sure that even though I am tenured and everything, I still tried to make sure that I'm guaranteed where I'm at. So I took on what's known as a 1-6, which is basically I now have literally periods 1 through 6. So I have all the periods. So I no longer even have a prep period. So I usually come like about an hour earlier than I normally would for school, and I usually leave an hour later than I normally did anyways.
I think when it comes to preparation is giving yourself as much time as you can. Because definitely your first year, depending on what school district you go to and what they provide for you, some school districts provide you like a whole curriculum where literally you just put on the slides that they provided you and you're going to go ahead and teach that. There's activities already made for the students that is going to help them engage with that content and get like a deeper understanding of the content by doing those activities. But other schools, they're not going to give you anything. And so literally each lesson, you're going to have to come up with your own slides, your own activities, assignments, everything. So just depending on where you're at, the level of preparation and the amount of time you're going to need is going to differ. But it never hurts to be over prepared. I think my very first year, like 5 years ago, if I was like 3 or 4 days ahead of my students, like I was really prepared. And what I mean by that is where like on a Monday, I know what I'm going to teach Thursday or Friday already. I have the rest of that week planned. Some days where, I have 2 kids at home, and actually my oldest boy, I think my wife was pregnant at the same time Dr. Murray's wife was, if I'm not mistaken. My son's 6, so I don't know if that matches up, but yeah, so I remember they were pregnant at the same time. And so, with 2 kids at home, family, all these other responsibilities, there'd be some times where I'm literally the night before I'm teaching, I'm preparing what they're going to do that next day. And so that can happen, especially the first year. So you got to make sure you're giving yourself as much time as you can to plan things out. Asking other teachers for help, the ones that are, nice enough to give you that help is nice too. There's teachers where they kind of hoard everything, like, hey, I struggle to come up with my stuff, so that's mine, and you got to struggle through it yourself. But there's other teachers that still remember what it was like to be a brand new, first year teacher, and are going to help you out and say, hey, yeah, I remember when I taught that grade, I did have a couple things, I could give you a couple things here. And so it is nice to be able to do that, to kind of, build up along with what you're doing. You have other things that you can fall back on, so that's helpful as well too. But I think, giving yourself enough time, and then the second year, you're kind of refining what you did the first time. So thinking back, take a lot of notes. You guys are still right now getting your degrees, so you're really good at note taking. Take notes, like, did this lesson work? What did I like about this lesson? What didn't work? What did the students really react to? What were some things where I can see they were checked out and not engaged? Because right now, where you guys are at, you're in that environment where you guys all love history. You're soaking up everything. Dr. Murray can, raps lyrical on, whatever he's talking about in modern China, and you guys are just going to soak it up. But once you're teaching at secondary, there's kids that hate history. They come into your class, literally, this is the class I most hate. And so you're going to have to be able to deal with that, and so you're kind of refining. Did the students react well to this? Did they not? Did they seem like they weren't engaged? And so next time you can change it up. Like, these parts of this lesson were good, I'll use them this second year, but I got to change this activity for something else. So that would be my advice kind of on the preparation side of it.
Wow, what to say after that? But definitely, you guys definitely need to plan ahead when you're doing lessons. You can definitely fall behind last minute, late at night before you have to show up to work, trying to put a lesson together. It doesn't help. And it's more enjoyable because when you know what your lesson plan is going to be, the kids know. They know whether you're fake or you're real. And they know that you planned ahead and you're energetic about being there and everything. But it's also, I mean, for a private school part, it's an all-inclusive classroom. So I do have IEP kids too. So I actually have to do lesson plans for them as well. So it's not just like, oh, you're thrown into a regular class or an AP class or whatever it may be. I'm dealing with all sorts of levels of students. And so I have to meet them where they are, as every teacher should. And so if I'm not mistaken too, I've seen a couple of lesson plans from different school districts. All lesson plans are different from different school districts. So you're going to be thrown at whatever expectations that school wants from you, maybe even the department even. And just like Oscar and James was saying, you may get nothing. You may get no curriculum whatsoever, and you have to come up with it yourself. So
these are really good bits of advice, and I hope everybody's paying attention because this is essential. I remember getting rid of my books as an undergrad, which was such a mistake. Bought them for $80. The bookstore bought them back for 50 cents, and I said, I need that 50 cents. I would bring back a stack of books that they paid hundreds of dollars for, and you get like enough to go get a sandwich, maybe. And so considering that, considering the price there, I urge you guys to not only keep your books, but whenever possible, but also keep your notes. And what you do in practice, you do in the game in terms of taking good notes and becoming better organized. There isn't like a pivot. There isn't like a light bulb that goes on when you get your diploma, like the Scarecrow in Wizard of Oz. It's what you're doing now. The way you're working now is going to be the way you're working later. And now so if you need to ramp up those study habits, if you need to change those organizational skills that you have, now's the time to tinker with that. Now's the time to find out what works. And Mark said he still has his books. He also said on the extracurricular stuff, avoid cheer and yearbook at all costs, which sounds anecdotal, but maybe is data-based advice. I think and probably sound, but I think keeping your materials and working on ways of staying organized, and think of a time in your life when things were really well organized. What were you doing then? What did you do to keep yourself organized, keep yourself on task, make sure that you're hitting deadlines and everything else. And James agrees on the yearbook front. But make sure that you're staying organized, because when the time comes for you to add some real color to a lecture or to a classroom session, if you've got that exciting project that you did, if you've got that paper that you spent 20 hours on as an undergrad, you're going to be glad you have it. And if you have that great textbook, that you paid $80 for, you're going to be glad you have that too, to add some depth to what you're doing. So stay organized and think about the habits that keep you on task and keep you on track. And Oscar mentioned our little guys, and I think that also reminds me of advice that I got from somebody. And the only really good bit of advice, about being a new father was, you're going to get a lot of advice, and everybody's right. They just might not be right for you. So just sort of smile and nod and take it on and say, okay, that's interesting, because it also applies to teachers that you meet. And Oscar and James and Byron have mentioned this. This is really, really important. You can get first impressions of people within the field, and that includes James and Byron and Oscar and others. You can get first impressions that sometimes can make you enthusiastic, or can be daunting, or can be intimidating, or can seem like some people are cynical, some people are enthusiastic, some people are happy to be there, some people aren't. Just remember, there's a huge diversity of types of teachers, kinds of teachers, just as in any field. And you're going to find your own way within it. So take on advice whenever you can, but know that you're going to be making your own way within this field. And you're going to be making it your own. So you don't have to always I note this again because my brother just had an experience with a senior teacher who was very, very bitter, and it really got him down. And it was an early experience that he had in terms of a sort of combative approach to students in the classroom. And this teacher was, I think, a little bit insecure and maybe intimidated by extremely bright students, which of course is a terrible approach. And it caused a lot of problems and sort of embittered him at an early stage, and he was it was sort of contagious. So I want you to be aware of that. And in the same way that your teaching reviews can sometimes get you down when you've got like the pea under the mattress, like you've got one bad review and you've got 20 good ones. Okay, good. You got 20 good reviews, and maybe the one bad review was, some kid didn't have breakfast or whatever it was. So just keep moving and realize that you're going to, with momentum and effort of your own, you're going to shape your own experience here. So I've talked for too long, but I think it's important that you bear that in mind, that you're going to make your own experience here through accumulating an enormous amount of materials. Mark, go ahead, and a new latecomer, Alex. Thank you so much for joining us. Alexander Ponce is also here. Mark, go ahead, and then I'll ask Alexander to introduce himself.
Hi, Alex. Do you want to go first, Alex?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And my sincerest apologies for being late. This is the life of a teacher. PLC meetings sometimes run really late. I apologize. Yeah, sorry. Jeremy, Professor Murray, so we're in our introductions right now? Is that what it is?
Oh, go ahead and introduce Alex.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah. So hi, everybody. My name is Alexander Ponce. I am a 7th-year teacher at Riverside STEM Academy in Riverside, California, right behind UCR. I teach all the history classes here. I teach AP Euro, AP US History, and AP Government with Econ. So I have 6 preps. I have 6 sections. So, it's overwhelmed, but that's what it's like right now. I was a alumni from Cal San Bernardino. I graduated in 2013. And I've been at the same place for about 7 years. We're a small school, still public. High school and middle school program, so I get a little bit of perspective on both worlds, but I'm also part of the leadership team here on campus. I am also part of a lot of different just team level stuff, but being the only history teacher / social science teacher here has its perks. I'm department chair, and I also don't have to respond to anyone but myself, so I always give myself pats on the back for doing a great job every year. So anyway, thank you for letting me introduce myself. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Alex is one of the stars, so I was going to say, when you come into the teaching program, one of the very first questions they'll ask is, do you want to get the MA right behind your credential? And don't tell anybody I said this because I'm the coordinator for that MA program, but for social studies teachers, I recommend you get your MA in your content area. And the reason I say that is because every now and then you're going to get a student where some small aspect of the curriculum lights their candle and they know everything about it. In my case, it was a solid B student until we got to ancient China. He could have taught a college class in Chinese history. He knew far more about it than I did. I knew enough to create an independent study, but I wasn't going to get him. He knew more than I did. So that will happen to you. So I encourage the MA in your content area, not in education.
And the good news is we've got our still has that new program smell to it, the MA program, which is just in our 2nd year. And we got a few guys here, Alexander and Matt and Christina and Thomas, who are in the program right now.
And Diane just asked a very pertinent question.
Go ahead.
Get your MA and your credential at the same time. No, get your credential, get your job, then get your MA. You don't want to end up too high on the salary scale. Don't do what I did and get your MA before your credential. You'll be so far up the salary scale, nobody will talk to you. So definitely get your credential, get a job, and then start your MA. And I would suggest going part-time, taking 2 classes per year, semester. The department will hate me for saying that, but 2 classes per semester is all you can handle while working full-time.
I think it's a good point. I do want to voice, Mark, and we've been here before. The other perspective that says degree up and barrel into the market with your degree. And although, and so there's these sort of different schools of thought, but I also want to ask Byron to talk a little bit about this, because Byron did an MA at Cal Poly Pomona, and he's heading into, I think, is it tenure track or adjunct work at the community college level, because that is another option that that's going to be open, that is open to our current and of course future MA students. So Byron, do you want to talk a little bit about that process? And I really appreciate what Mark said, by the way, in terms of understanding what you look like on paper coming into a job interview. And that, I think that is a consideration. So Byron, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I'm going to be starting out as an adjunct, of course, as everyone probably does. But it's very interesting. Even going through with the master's program to start with, it's very challenging. You're being pushed at the ends with their professors, but it's so rewarding because you gain so much knowledge from it, more so than what you would expect in a BA. They really push you to know the content like as if you were them. You know, you have a PhD already, you know the subject so well that you're prepared to go on to the community college and you can teach these classes, not feeling like you're unprepared, or you feel that another student's going to be like, oh, I know more than you, and it's going to be all bad if that happens. Granted, I can't really say anything on, I don't have the experience yet. It will be in spring that I will be starting. But definitely a major player would be start networking. If you're in the MA program now and you're thinking, you know, maybe I want to do community college, maybe I want to do university and get a PhD, you need to start putting your name out there. Start talking to the department chairs, see where you stand, see if you can get a position with them, get a couple of classes, start teaching. That's what I'm thinking about doing right now. And I don't know, maybe in the future I might get a PhD. I don't know. But for right now, I mean, that's what I can attest to. I don't have the experience just yet. But talking with the department chair now, it's like I'm going crazy because there is no curriculum. You make your own. It's academic freedom at the community college level. So you choose your books that you want. You create all your PowerPoint notes, and they basically trust you that you're doing your due diligence. So
I want to ask Alexander to jump in here in just a second, but there is something bearing on Alexander's experience, but to what Mark and Byron just said about that hypothetical or that really wonderful student. And actually Alexander and a few others, some who are now in the MA program, gave me the very real mindset and approach to the classroom that I encourage everybody to take. And that is that in many ways, I walk into a classroom where I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room. If I'm in the sort of 50th percentile, I'm happy. I do have something to teach you, but I don't assume I'm the smartest person in the room. And I think that, and I don't need to be, right? I don't have to be. And it took a lot of pressure off because I remember, I think it might've been my first class and Alexander was in there. And there were a few other students in there who were not only extremely bright, but also extremely well prepared for every classroom session, for every classroom discussion session. And that was really good for me to sort of set a bar of how I encountered the students. And so I very quickly was sort of disabused of the notion that I would have a kind of encounter with a student where I would be made to feel awkward. And that's actually what my brother's encounter with this instructor was, this instructor who that had happened to him. And he had sort of, I don't know what happened. You know, obviously it was traumatic, so traumatic that he became very embittered by it. But there's nothing to be worried about except to say, wow, I've got this really awesome student in my classroom. Isn't that exciting? And the student might know more than I do, about, you know, whatever, about any number of subjects. And that's really exciting. And as Mark really duly noted, then what do you do with that student? Well, you certainly know enough to put together an independent study that's going to keep everybody excited and moving. And so you say to the student, hey, go do this and come back and tell me what you find. And I'm gonna guide you through that. Michelle, and then Alexander, want to hear a little bit more from you.
Yeah, that's something that we talk a lot about in 3010, actually. is, now with the internet and so many resources readily available, you don't have to be that fountain of knowledge. You're not going to be the only person that your students are going to be able to find out this information from, unless they're going to go do some research in a library. They have the information available to them. So one of the things we talk a lot about in 3010 is, how do we really use history, social science to build critical thinking skills, to build students to understand how to research and validate sources. How do you take the skills from history, social science, and apply them in your life, but also in history, social science classes? Because sometimes students ask me questions like I'm Google, and I don't know the answer to some random questions. But if we can model ways to show them how to find those answers and how to dig through information and throw out the stuff that's garbage and check for relevancy, then we're really building useful life skills.
Yeah, absolutely, if I may. Yeah, so I encounter this quite often as well too. So I work at a STEM school where a lot of my kids are math and science oriented, and they know so much more than I do about those fields that I could never possibly, catch up to them even in this modern day, like with all they know. But I take their particular interests and their knowledge much deeper than my own about what it is, and I try to nurture that however I can whenever I get the opportunity. I mean, a really big art of teaching is being able to differentiate your instruction so that you can reach certain students. I mean, not everyone learns the same way. And what you need to be able to do is balance how you deal with one student versus another, because one size fits all does not work in our job. It just doesn't. So what I tend to try to do is, if I don't know the answer to something, the first thing I tell students is I'm honest, like, I don't know the answer to that, but you know what, we're going to find out what that is. And I do appreciate Professor Murray, Jeremy, sorry, telling me that, our first year, because I honestly looked at him as like sage on the stage, and now looking at him like this, wondering, is like, I totally empathize, Jeremy. I've had this enlightenment year too, where I think it's like, man, I really got to catch up to some of my own content, because I've got to really be sharp for these kids whenever they challenge me. But the short answer to all of it is, you find a way to nurture that interest in a child, in a student, whatever it is that they are interested in, so that they can continue being interested. You don't shut it down, you don't dismiss it, and you find a way to connect with them on that level, even if it is at least trying to scratch the surface of their interests or directing them in a way that will do that. And don't ever doubt yourself in any way, that even though they might be smarter, more knowledgeable than you still have something to offer them. You have experience, you have patience, you have empathy, you have direction, and just basically all those combined to help them continue to develop their interests and find a way to only grow in that way. And that is the currency that you build with them for classroom management, because you've developed relationship. You actually have them work with you to help others as well too. I mean, this year, if anything, has been one of the most enlightening years of my life, learning about the importance again of relationships. I knew this already coming in, but it's that opportunity with a student who's bright and has questions that you could build that relationship with, so that you can make them do other things that you need them to do and be the other expert in the class. A perfect example of that right now is I have a 12th grader who is, he knows every Supreme Court case that is possibly out there. And whenever I have a question about that, I just look at him and say, Ritobon, does that sound right to you? And he knows how to answer for the whole class. And he's our expert. And everyone just looks at him like, if we don't know, ask him. And he'll know. And he takes pride in that. And he actually kind of laughs and he gets shy, but he knows it's endearing that so many can trust in him to be that wealth of knowledge. So my answer is, use those kids as your relationship building and your ability to build capital in class to just engage with them altogether. Sorry if that was too long. Sorry.
Excellent, Alexander. And I remember going in feeling, especially my World Civ class, as a modern China historian, somebody's going to say, Battle of Hastings, what year was it? And my life will fall apart. So that kind of brittleness, that kind of fragility can be sort of dispensed with. And I do absolutely, even if you don't go for the CSET waiver, even if you're going to take the CSET waiver anyway, take those 3010, 5700 classes. And Alexander, we talked a little bit about this before you joined us, But Professor Lorimer is the one to get you thinking about these sort of things in a way that is that is not only extremely well prepared, but also really durable for whatever you're going to encounter. So I'm excited about students having access to those courses, not only in Mark's program, but as undergrads as well, so that they hit the credentials program ready to know what to expect. We're at the top of the hour, but I'd like, if anybody would like to stick around for another 10 or 15 minutes, if that's okay. Anybody who needs to go, any of our generous resident experts who are here, if you need to hit the road, that is okay. Please do feel free. But if anybody has time for another 10 or 15 minutes, I think we're still very much in the thick of this conversation. And so I'd like to hear if there are some more urgent questions. Mark says yes to Jason asking, would it be best to work as a substitute teacher while working on your credentials? Yeah, that's a wonderful thing, to be able to get into the classroom and to do that. But again, I don't have perspective on this, so I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask our now 5 guests who I really again want to thank for joining us. If you need to hit the road, that's okay. But I'd like to hear a little bit more of what I don't know to ask and what our students might not know to ask.
I'll go ahead and speak on this. So for me, I actually never was a substitute teacher. So I went straight into the profession, never having done that before. But I feel like even though for me it wasn't an issue and I was able to jump in and be able to start teaching and not really have it be too much of an issue for me with the idea of being around younger kids or classroom management or how to carry myself in a manner that a teacher should be, because you're the adult in the room, and everyone's looking to you. I think getting that experience, I think, is helpful. So I think even though I didn't do it and I don't feel like I lacked because I didn't do it, I think if you're able to do it and you're interested in doing it, I think it's a good thing to do, because again, it kind of gets you into the classroom, depending on, the kind of experience of the actual classroom teacher. Some teachers are really good at preparing their students for a sub. So you might have the students act a certain way, and then other teachers, especially less experienced teachers, are not as good as preparing their students for a sub. So the students might act a totally different way that they wouldn't act for their actual classroom teacher. So just keep that in mind in the back of your head. It might not be necessarily you, just the fact that there's a substitute. Other students in the school will say, hey, this class has a sub. You might even have students ditching their class and come into your class pretending they're part of your class. So it just depends on the situation. But certainly, I think it would only be to your benefit if you wanted to try and sub first.
Alex, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to say this, but I came late, but I don't know if this has been discussed in the meeting earlier, but speaking from just my own perspective right now as a teacher, we are going through a very and this is not, and by the way, before I say what I need to say, I want you to know that what I'm trying to say is meant to encourage and to make it endearing, that I believe that you should be following this path and becoming a teacher. I really do. I cannot stress that enough for anyone who wants to be. So that's why I want to premise what I want to say. We're going through a really tough crisis right now. A lot of us as teachers, where we're facing a sub shortage, and a lot of our life is often in huge disarray because of different things. Students missing class for all kinds of reasons. Having to do coverage for other teachers when they're gone altogether, and this is a really tough time to be a teacher. But one of the things that I think I've been really thankful to experience this year is the ability to just really assess what the most important thing is in my classes all the time, and that is ultimately the well-being of your students while they're there with you for 50, 60, 90 minutes, whatever it might be. And remembering that the most important thing is the most important thing, and that is you building a relationship with kids that sometimes you're the only outlet that they have for them to feel like they are being heard, that they are being cared for, that someone is empathizing with their situations, all those things. And so I've said this at every future history teacher panel, and I think this is one thing I just want to reiterate. We're here to teach students, and our content is secondary. And the most important thing is that you want to make sure that whenever you develop your class culture, your culture is one of the most important things that you start off with at the beginning. This year, it was a little bit shocking for many of us to try to approach at this time in the year, November, to scrap our expectations and start completely over with the idea of like, what do students expect of us? What do we expect of our students? And having that conversation constantly to develop a class culture where they feel like they are they have a voice, that they can think critically, that they are being challenged, but also being met where they are as well too, and having the patience and understanding to say, you know what, yes, the last 2-3 years of your life have been a huge like struggle, and you know, yes, you're reading at maybe a grade level that is 2-3 before where you are supposed to be right now, and you're having trouble just getting your thoughts out on paper. Being able to adjust this and kind of like be flexible and improving is part of the art of teaching. And there's a teacher that I really love and admire online. His name is Stephen Heimler. He's a really awesome history, social science teacher, and he has a lot of great videos that I use for my content and stuff like that too. And he says, like, quite honestly, that teaching is an art, and you know, it's not something that is easy to perfect, and that's what you work on every time. But I just encourage every one of you. We need you. We need you right now, and we would love to see you join our districts, and you know, we want you to be encouraged that, you know, even though it's a struggling time right now, but we want you to get out here and help us out, because we need great teachers, we need people that love kids, and we need enthusiastic young blood that is ready to come in to meet the demands of a new just generation that is going to teach some of the old heads how to do things differently. And I put myself there because I've had to learn so many different things. And my last thing to say is if you get the chance, when you do get the chance to, is take on a student teacher. I am in my 3rd student teacher that I've taken on this year. And I can't tell you how much of a great experience it is for you as a teacher and them to constantly like learn about what is new being taught in the credential programs, what are the new focuses that are being used, new strategies, just even technology. Like, yeah, I had no idea this program exists that we could do to teach what we're doing. So again, just to repeat, make sure that you love kids and you're ready to teach the kids. The most important thing is the most important thing to them. And if you can get a chance to get a student teacher when it's your turn, definitely do so. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Sorry.
That was great. Thank you, Alexander. I want to open to the rest of our crew. I also want to just ask you, Alex, to confirm that I got the right link there for Heimler. I'll check with him in just a second. But anybody else who wants to jump in? One thing about, and I wasn't familiar with this teacher, Stephen Heimler. When I asked Alexander, just confirm that I put the right link there in the chat for Heimler. I'm also going to share a few other resources for curriculum, but also for connections that I shared in the email announcement of this event. And this is just sort of a working list of a few things, but I want to remind everybody that these resources are out there, and there are many more resources and other materials. I've worked a little bit with the OER project, the Big History Project, and there's a lot of open source mashable materials that you can do whatever you want with. But who wants to jump in next with some thoughts for our students?
I could jump in then. Yeah, just since the topic of relationship building came up, I did want to also stress that, yeah, that is the single most important thing, is building relationships with your students. And actually, not only is it the most important thing as far as kind of a vehicle and a method for giving your content to your students, having good, strong relationships with them, but that's actually, as yourself, the teacher, that's the best part of the job. That's the thing that really puts miles on your soul, where you feel like you have a job where you're actually making a difference. You're getting to know these kids. And in my district where I work at, San Bernardino City, I mean, we have kids that have all kinds of things going on, kids that have life experiences that I could never imagine, coming from, middle-class home where both my parents went to college, all my siblings are college graduates. These kids have gone through some things I could never imagine. And, students where if you listen to them and you're open to them, they tell you about all different stories that have happened, dads in jail, students that are in the foster care system, students that are homeless, all kinds of needs around you. And if you're that one person that they can talk to and open up to, again, it does good for them, and it does good for yourself too, making you feel like you've made a difference, connecting with them and kind of being their shoulder to cry on. And again, even students that aren't interested in history, when they have that level of relationship with you, they're going to buy in, not because they care about history, but because they care about you. They see you as a person that they respect. And because of that, they're going to engage, even if it's not their subject or something that they're interested in. And the way to always build relationships is just be yourself. There's so many teachers, first year teachers, new teachers, where they try and come in and they try and strong arm the kids. And they've heard that they have to be really strict and have good discipline. Don't smile until December. And that's just not the right approach, because it's not authentic and it's not something that you can sustain for the whole year. Whereas if you come in as yourself, you're yourself. Obviously, you can continue to be yourself and connect with the kids, with the interests they have and the interests you have, and try and connect in a real authentic way. And that's going to take you a long way in your career, and make sure you make it out of those, first, second, third year, which are the really hard years for a teacher. And, going back to what Mr. Ponce said, is once you're like me, you're in your fifth year, then yeah, you can take on a student teacher and everything, because you've got yourself through those kind of harder years where it's more of a struggle. And again, building those relationships with the students is what's going to get you there. Again, remember, be yourself. And that doesn't mean you don't have high expectations. You can come in with really strong procedures, but your own personality, whatever that is, that's what's going to shine through. And again, having high expectations for your students is always a good thing. It's always going to help with the classroom management. Having too many procedures, too many rules is not bad, because you could always scale that back. But if you come in with hardly any structure, any procedures, that's when things go really wrong. And there's no way to kind of rein them back in once you've set yourself up that way. So again, come in with a list of stuff, make sure you know how they're going to be, depending on what grade level. For 11th grade, for me, it looked very different than it does for 7th grade. 11th graders have been in school for a really long time. They know what it is to be a student. But with 7th graders, I literally have to have a procedure for how do they sharpen their pencil? How do you get up and throw something away? How do you turn in your work? You have to have a procedure for everything, because if you don't, things go out of control. So it's okay to have a lot of procedures. It's okay to have a lot of rules, but be you and authentically, connect with your students based on the person you are, because that's what they're going to want to see. And I think James mentioned it earlier. I think actually Byron also, is the kids will notice if you're not authentic. These kids, again, you might not remember what it was like, or maybe you guys, if you're, a little bit younger than us, since you're still in college, maybe you do remember what it was like to be a student. But I know for me, it's so long ago. I think I graduated, 2003 from high school. And so, I haven't been a K through 12 student in a long time, and it's hard to remember what it's like sitting in the classroom. And you forget that these kids, they've had a lot of teachers, and they could easily spot who a fake teacher is and a teacher that's really not invested in them. So don't be that teacher. Be authentically invested. They're real human beings with real lives and real personalities, and getting to know that side of them. Again, that's the greatest part about being a teacher. So, like Mr. Ponce said, I encourage you to get into the profession. Greatest job you can ever hope for. And all the other kind of, the other tangible things like weekends off, nights off, summers, all that stuff is awesome, but it's honestly just the icing on the cake, because being with those students every day, that's the amazing thing. And I think, everyone here can definitely agree with that, I think.
Thanks, Oscar. And thanks, Michelle. I've added that link to our list of links that I'll send out with the, we've got a sort of growing list of resources. And to that, I want to add all of your former faculty, everybody. That's me. Keep in touch and come back and do something like this when you are gainfully employed. But also when it comes time for letters of recommendation, it's nice to have that open line of communication. And have a sense of what the really remarkable resources are that are available to you, and make the most of those resources. Make the most of the resources that are here on our campus, in our department, et cetera. All right. So who's next? Well, let's if we have about 5 more minutes, we can wrap a few things up.
Alex had a question in the chat asking about if we get our MA before the credential program, will we have a hard time getting employed out of school?
What do you think about that? Go ahead, Michelle.
I was just thinking right now, probably not. But I don't work for a school like that. So
Mark and I always have a little bit of a disagreement on this, but Mark has his experience, and I know Peg and Jim Hill, who had done some hiring, felt, well, I think it depends they felt it wasn't as much of a consideration. I think it potentially can be a consideration if you're being hired at a certain scale, right, Mark? But I think also, especially in this market, you're in a very good position to get hired. And of course, the MA then gives you all of the regional community colleges to apply for as well. Write your own syllabus, teach a course on the daily life of a medieval serf, right? And all the cool stuff that would go into that. Write a syllabus around that, and write a syllabus about women in the antebellum South. Whatever it is, you can write your own syllabus. So the MA also allows you that option then to teach at local community colleges. And of course, you're going to be expected to do World Civ and all kinds of other stuff, but you'll get a few nice courses that you're able to write your own ticket on, as Byron was telling us. Thanks for sharing your email, Oscar. Who else wants to jump in? Any parting thoughts? This seemed to go very quickly because it was such a wonderful crew. Byron, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of reinforce what you had said earlier. Take advantage of what you have now at Cal State San Bernardino. There are so many times where I felt like I wanted to take classes with certain professors and I never did. I thought, oh no, I'll come back to it. I never did. I never got to take classes with Dr. Yagubian or Dr. Jones. And I'm like, that's a shame because they're like really awesome professors. And so take advantage of the classes. Don't be hesitant to take classes, even taking classes that may be a little bit out of your discipline. I mean, you guys are history majors, but if we're doing social studies and you have to teach government or economics, taking some of those classes is definitely going to help you in the long run, because if you have to teach those classes, you're going to have at least a solid foundation for teaching those.
Thanks, Byron. Mark, did you want to weigh in with any parting thoughts?
Just to say, here, Brian or Byron, that's awesome advice. Take things outside of your content area. That econ class can be very valuable.
Yeah, and you'll be glad you have that textbook and those notes when somebody says, "Oh, you're doing government," or you're doing econ. You'll be glad you've got those notes to give you some detail. Thanks, and thanks to our guests for sharing your email addresses with our students. Save your notes, says Alexander. Yeah, really do save your notes, and a lot of them are going to be digital, so that's easy enough. Just throw it on one of those thumb drives that can hold millions and millions of files, and keep track of it. Actually, save it in 3 places. That's what a photographer friend of mine said. Said if I don't have it saved in 3 places, I don't consider it saved. So that's a good bit of advice as well. But keep those materials, keep those notes, because you're going to be really glad you have them. Likely that a lecture that you spent 2 hours with or an hour and a half on as an undergrad is just going to be 10 minutes in a high school classroom. So you can make that a really action-packed 10 minutes or 15 minutes if you've got all those notes still with you. Anybody else on any parting thoughts? And thanks again, Byron, for sharing your contact. Great, Miguel's still got his high school notes. I think I might have ritually burned my high school notes. I don't recommend it. It was cathartic, but I don't. Anybody? Any final notes from anybody? All right. Well, we're going to do another one of these because this is always, as I always say, this is absolute highlight of my year to get you guys together. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Mark, our faculty, for joining us. Thank you to our terrific alumni, Alexander, Byron, James, Oscar, for joining us. Oscar, new to the crew. James, you've been to a few of these before. Byron and Alexander, always. It's always so great to connect with you guys. Thanks to our MA students who joined and our undergrads. This is really, it's just a highlight of my year to make these connections And again, having Michelle and Mark here to really be able to help you guys navigate is just essential. So we'll wrap it up. Thank you. I will send an email out to the department, and Michelle just shared her information there as well. I'll send an email out to the department with, I won't paste everybody's email address into the email to the department. They can watch the video and see the chat and go through if they'd like, but I will share all of these wonderful resources with everybody. Thanks, Byron. So those of you who are listening in now or on the history department email list, if anybody's in the history department and did not get my announcements about this and found out about it some other way, we've got to figure that out. I think there's some hiccup in our departmental email where a bunch of our students are not getting those. Anyway, that's a matter that I'll take up with someone else. Thank you. James says he's here if you need us. Thanks. And James, you better make it Jeremy. Thank you, guys. So I will see you guys again. We will do this again in the spring. I hope I can bring the crew together again. Super Friends assemble or whatever. Get everybody back together. Thank you guys so much. If there aren't any parting thoughts, thanks, Alexander. Thanks, guys. It's an absolute delight to catch up with you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.